Okay, we're going to get started, and some folks will perhaps trickle in as we go. So, good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Emily Riley. I'm the Director of Public Engagement at BGC, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's program. I'm a white woman with brown copper curly hair. I'm wearing clear circular frame glasses and a white shirt. I'm also sitting in my living room beside a window with lots of plants behind me and some pink curtains. I'd like to start by acknowledging the land we're hosting this event from. Many cities and institutions in America were founded on the exclusions and erasures of many indigenous peoples, including those on whose land, Mannahatta, from which we are hosting this event. The land of the five boroughs that make up New York City are the traditional homelands of the Lenape, Merrick, Canarsie, Matinacock, and Rockaway nations. Despite systemic erasures, these lands persist as intertribal trade lands under the stewardship of many nations and over 115,000 intertribal Native American, First Nations, and Indigenous peoples who currently call New York City home. If you'd like to learn more about the land you're on, you can click the link that I will post in the chat shortly. In addition, I'd like to acknowledge those whose ancestors did not arrive on these lands of their own free will, and whose tremendous cultural, economic, and technological contributions continue to provide the foundation for our lives. Welcome to Beyond Sustainability, Cultural Organizing for Social Justice, a conversation curated by Chinatown Art Brigade. This is the first of two programs, so if you enjoyed today, please come back and join us on June 17th for Collectively Imagining Degentrified and Abolitionist Futures, which we'll also post a link to in the chat shortly. I want to point out a few pieces of housekeeping. You can enable closed captioning at the bottom of your screen, I hope. We have had trouble with that today, but I hope it's there. It's a CC in a little box to your right. We also invite you to submit questions during the Q&A. You can do that using the Q&A function, or if you'd prefer to speak, you can just raise your hand and we'll enable you to talk. I'm now going to introduce our Chinatown Art Brigade facilitators for tonight, Diane Wong and Anna Osbeck. Diane Wong is Assistant Professor of Political Science at Rutgers University, Newark. She's also an affiliate member of Global Urban Studies. She holds a PhD in American politics, an MA in comparative race, ethnicity, and immigration from the Department of Government at Cornell University. Her current book project, You Can't Evict a Movement, Intergenerational Activism and Housing Justice in New York City, focuses on intergenerational resistance to gentrification in Manhattan's Chinatown. She's also working on a second book volume titled Contemporary Asian American Activism, Movement Visions, and New Directions for the 21st Century on intergenerational resistance to gentrification in Manhattan's Chinatown. Anna Osbeck is a multimedia producer, filmmaker, and is a member of the cultural organizing collectives Chinatown Art Brigade and The Illuminator. She is assistant professor of visual journalism at Purchase College as well. I'm going to hand the mic now over to Diane and Anna. Over to you. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thanks so much, Emily, for that wonderful introduction. So I can just describe the Chinatown Art Brigade and the work that we do before I hand it off to Anna to introduce our panelists for today. So Chinatown Art Brigade, or CAP for short, is an intergenerational collective driven by the fundamental belief that cultural, material, and aesthetic modes of production have the power to advance social change. And so we're mainly comprised of Asian American and Asian diasporic identifying folks, visual artists, media makers, educators, organizers with deep roots in Manhattan's Chinatown. And we make work that centers art and culture as a way to support community-led campaigns around issues of gentrification and displacement, and work largely in partnership with CAB organizing Asian communities and their Chinatown Tenants Union. And so I just want to say that we do situate our anti-displacement work within a global struggle for liberation. And so we stand with a free Palestine and the end to the siege currently in Gaza. And so I'm going to pass it now to Anna, who's going to introduce our panelists for today.
Thanks, Diane, and hello, everyone. So we're really excited to have our speakers today. They're all from two collectives that inspire us very much and who we've had the opportunity of working with in the past. I will say particularly during the pandemic when things were pretty awful for a lot of us, these two groups really were doing amazing work, of course, not with that struggle that we're going to hear more about today. And I'm very excited about that. So let me go ahead and read off their bios for you. So Pati Rodriguez is a lifelong Bushwick resident of Andean Ecuadorian descent. She is an organizer and co-founder of Mi Casa Resiste, an anti-capitalist collective based in Bushwick that uses art and direct action to fight the displacement and criminalization of low-income Black and Brown families in Brooklyn. Pati is a collective member of Mayday Space, a social justice center in Brooklyn, where she develops programming that caters to the POC immigrant community in Bushwick, and where she helps organize the local food distribution through Comida Pal Pueblo. Pati is also part of the fight against environmental racism in North Brooklyn through the Frack Out of Brooklyn Coalition, an Afro-Indigenous-led coalition which has been doing political education and direct actions against the fracked gas pipeline being built by National Grid through predominantly Black and Brown neighborhoods in Brooklyn. This Chinatown International Coalition, or simply the CID Coalition, builds intergenerational, intercultural, and community-based organizing for neighborhood resistance and community power. And we have two speakers today from CID Coalition. Yin Yu, who uses she, her pronouns, is a community organizer, abolitionist, and system thinker. She is a core member of Parasol Pacific Rim Solidarity Network, CID Coalition, aka Humbao's Not Hotels, and Seattle People's Party. She is an immigrant from Taipei, Taiwan, and grew up where the Treaty of Point Elliott was signed, Bukwiltiu of Snohomish people. This is 30 minutes north of the Duwamish First People of Seattle. Marlon Didin Herrera, who uses he, him pronouns, is a community organizer with Humba's Not Hotels or the CID Coalition in Seattle on the unceded land of the Duwamish people. Marlon is a second-generation Filipino-American and a lifelong resident of the Coast Salish territories with a background in policy and planning. So welcome to all three of you. We're so excited that you guys are joining us today, and thank you so much. We're going to start off hearing from the folks from CID Coalition, and after that, we're going to hear from Pati. So Yin, if you wanted to, oh yes, get us started. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diane, Anna, and everyone at BARD. We're really excited to be here and share the space for you. Share the space with you. Like you said, I'm Marlon Herrera. I use he, him pronouns. I am a dark-skinned Filipino man with my hair swept to the right, wearing glasses, and I'm sitting in a conference room with a bunch of trains and the Old Rainier Brewery behind me. Yin?
Hi, Yin, she, her pronouns. I'm in my living room with some frames. I'm an Asian, East Asians with red knotted earrings, and I'm happy to be here.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, so we're gonna dive into just a little bit of grounding about the history of how the Chinatown International District Coalition came together. And we can't have that conversation without acknowledging, the occupation of Seattle and the struggle that our ancestors went through to form this really wonderful, unique, vibrant, and just a place that lower class, working class folks, Asian Pacific Islanders, Black folks, artists, queer folks can call home. So in the 19th century, we had the first white settlers come to the West Coast here in Seattle. We are on the cultural, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, Tulalip, and all Coast Salish tribes. Chinese immigrants actually began arriving in Seattle in the 1850s, and they lived in the first Chinatown in the picture shown on the screen, which is actually built over the tide flats of today's Elliott Bay. That has since been filled in and was one of the first gentrifications of Chinatown and displacements, is when all of the bay was filled in, a new seawall was built, and a new town and streets were built on top of these boardwalks. Of course, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1886, which followed with riots not just in Seattle, but in also several suburbs of Seattle. That was very anti-Chinese, where they believed that their labor is being stolen, and just a lot of white supremacy boiling to the top, and a lot of parallels to what we're seeing today. The first Chinatown that you see in this picture was actually burnt down in the Great Seattle Fire of 1889. And Japanese settlers, when they began arriving, developed Japantown or Nihonmachi, which has been mostly displaced today and is a stadium district. Next slide. Come the turn of the century, there were a lot of really big infrastructure projects. In the pictures you can see to the right in the center, it is Interstate 5 that connects Canada and Mexico via Washington, Oregon, California. And that was actually built straight through a lot of BIPOC neighborhoods, including the Chinatown International District. That's also used to be a giant hill that was regraded to form a really flat, easily developable surface. An important part of the 20th century that we have to mention too is Executive Order 9906, which was the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. After that era, we had some Vietnamese settlers begin joining us in what's now called Little Saigon. And on top of that, during the Executive Order 9906, a lot of the Black community made their place home in the CID. And we also have to mention Uncle Bob and the Gang of Four. Uncle Bob Santos was a Filipino organizer in the Chinatown ID who really was fighting displacement and for community developments that we really need, like health clinics, like local mom and pop shops. And he actually started a very nationally known, he was part of this collective called the Gang of Four, which is four multicultural organizers in Seattle. And if you have the next time, I can't dive deep into it now, but I urge you all to look them up. Next slide. Now, fast forward to today. The most recent comprehensive plan of the city of Seattle did note that the Chinatown International District has among the highest displacement risk in the entire city. New stadiums, new hotels, we're rapidly expanding our transit and other transportation systems, and chain restaurants are making a big influx into the neighborhood. And things are rapidly changing, and our ancestors fought so hard to create this place where BIPOC working class folks can really call home. And we're doing everything we can to try to preserve this so we can all have a place to thrive and fight for a better future. Next slide. Now, one thing that's important to note too is redlining and racial restriction covenants. Until the 60s, 70s, a lot of the homes in Seattle had language in the deeds that said basically only white folks and their servants can live here, and explicitly banned people of colors and religious minorities. A lot of those are still inside the deeds to this day, with the language being there. And in addition to redlining, which is a well-known practice where the federal government denied mortgages to undesirable neighborhoods and local governments selectively denied services to those neighborhoods, and continued to cycle neglect while pushing all public and private investment into wealthy white neighborhoods. The effects of that are still seen to this day. And if you're interested in learning more about this very explicitly racist housing history in Seattle, the University of Washington has an amazing website with all the resources with maps and deeds. And it's the program, or I can put it in the chat later. I forgot the exact name of the program. Next slide. And then of course, what that leads in today is gentrification. Like I mentioned, we have the highest development pressures in the entire city. We have a ton of public and private development that's really jacking prices up. Housing supply is already so short in the city because about 60 to 70% of it is single family homes, while the Chinatown ID is very, very dense with like 8-story, mostly former brick buildings that are used to be almost tenements. Influx of chain restaurants and rapidly rising costs. I don't know about y'all, but here in Seattle, it's not that hard to find. I mean, it's really, really hard to find a burger under like 18 bucks. And then I'm talking a lot about these economic and financial stats world to lay their eggs in a place where they call home. Every holiday season, we come home and enjoy friends and family, and just home is somewhere in the heart where we know we can thrive. And I think that's what's at risk here, and that's what we're fighting for. Next slide. And then here is a close-up picture of the last generation of organizers under fighting a development of a stadium. And you can see one of the signs says Humbaus not hot dogs, and that was their rally cry, which we adopted to Humbaus not hotels today. And you can see this cute comic with Chinatown ID Humbao, which I realize is kind of a regional thing, but it's basically steam bun, kicking a hot dog and telling them to get out of the neighborhood. Next slide. And this is what it looks like today in the spirit of past generations organizing and fighting, and in the spirit of resilience. We have protests and demonstrations, and we try to do a balance of direct action, of creative empowerment, and even sometimes playing in the policy sphere and doing everything we can to fight for our neighborhood. Next slide. So we read off our mission earlier. Thanks, I believe Anna read it off. And I just want to list our 4 principles: collective and democratic participation, accountable love ethic, justice and equity, and creative empowerment. A lot of the time we get dinged and people say, when people complain that we're a relatively new collective and we don't have any street cred, we always say that we're not, our past experiences or our relative street cred compared to the nonprofit industrial complex, that doesn't matter. Where we get our legitimacy is our values and our principles, and we stay steadfast to that. Next slide. And we first came together when a luxury hotel was going to be built across the street from an elder care facility, and redeveloping some of our shops there into luxury condos and a 4.5-star hotel. And Cynthia Brothers, one of our comrades, wrote an article saying, "Will Grandma have a place in the new CID?" That was, I believe, around 2015, and we've been organizing ever since. Next slide. We held our first community meeting in 2017, and these are some of the results we got when we surveyed elders and neighbors and just community members who really cared about the future. 90% of them felt bad about a new 14-story hotel luxury condos. 70% felt bad or very bad about how the neighborhood is headed. And 60% felt that the city wasn't doing enough in terms of community engagement. Next slide. And then even more recently, when my father first came to America, one of his frequent watering holes was a place called Busch Garden. Very long history. It used to be a single residency occupancy hotel, which can be compared to what tenements were essentially here on the West Coast. It turned into a fancy Japanese restaurant, eventually turned into a dive bar, and it is the home of karaoke, I believe in Seattle, and maybe even the West Coast. We used to have our weekly meetings there. We organized closely with Auntie Karen, the owner, and you can see her in the center of the screen. And we worked with nonprofits and other community orgs, did direct actions, worked with the city, tried to negotiate with the developer. But at the end of the day, Busch Garden was kicked out in the middle of the pandemic, and it is being redeveloped to luxury condos. Thankfully, there is a new nonprofit development coming to the neighborhood, and Busch Garden will have a new home. Next slide. Here are some of our demands over the years, really tackling all these issues. We want an end to non-affordable housing in the neighborhood and other historically redlined communities. We want commercial rent control for legacy BIPOC businesses. We have a special review district, really wonky stuff, but this community elected board gives it a yes or no to new developments in the neighborhood. And lately, they've just been rubber stamping everything an architect gives to them. And we want new design review policies that really serves the community. And in addition, at the end of the day, we want to decommodify land ownership, and we want community owned land. Next slide. And I'll hand it over to Yan. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. So in talking about sustainability, beyond sustainability, I'm going to, since this is more of a academia host, I'm going to talk about it in the framework of the 2 loops of the Bacana Institute, Theory of Change. And Margaret Wheatley is the executive former executive director of Bacana Institute, who is referenced in Adrienne Maree Brown's emergent strategy. So a big system thinker who created this two-loop change. And so what you see is that as the system is declining, we are creating a whole new system in parallel. And oftentimes in government and nonprofit, I feel like they're oftentimes trying to reform or sustain the current declining system, while a lot of times grassroots are forming and creating a whole new system. And so I'll be talking more about the Seattle organizing climate. So in disrupting the system, there's a No New Youth Jail campaign that's been an 8-year campaign to stop a development of a brand new jail. And this campaign was built, initially from Didi, from just a collective conversation into a full-blown movement that really challenges, do we need a brand new facility of 100 beds when we're currently only using 30 and all this resources? So this has, I will talk about, that has drastically changed the Seattle political scene. So in the beginning of the system, what you see is pioneering naming, which of course I didn't create this, and pioneers is a very settler colonial term, but that's the start of naming the brand new system. And so there's oftentimes a theory of 3.5%. That is what you need of the population to sustain a nonviolent civil disobedience in order to create political change, whether it is overturning a dictator or creating system change. So in another effort back in 2016 was Block the Bunker, where we're stopping a new police precinct from being built, and really questioning, should we spend $100 million to build a precinct, or should we be using that to support the school systems, to remodel school? At the time, Rainier Beach in the South End hadn't been remodeled since it was built in the 70s. And so there was a lot of community conversation, monthly conversations around what is the vision? What do we need instead? And this is built off of the Black Lives Matter movement and building off of actually a climate organizing Shall Know campaign. So multiple campaigns led up to this campaign's success in stopping this from being built. And so what we're creating is a network of support, a network of connecting. And I feel like the reason that Marlon and I are part of this conversation is because of this Coast to Coast Chinatown conversation. When Diane Wong was in Seattle, and creating conversations with the historically Redlining Community Coalition, which is we're not just talking about our Chinatown International District, we're also talking about the Black community that's been displaced in the South End and in the Central District. And I think it's important for us to create this network so that we know who we're fighting against, that the developers all look the same. We're fighting against white supremacy, patriarchy, imperialism, and connecting our struggles and uplifting each other's struggles. So in moving through this two-loop theory, there's also nourishment and community of practice. For me, CID Coalition, we was able to do a projection because of the Chinatown Art Brigade when they were in Seattle, and help us, strategize and do a different kind of tactics. We definitely have been doing protests because of the Coast to Coast Week of Action, of the solidarity of taking to the streets. And for me, Parasol is definitely my political home, to talk about, practice and theory of, when we're talking about the No New Youth show, especially in Parasol, we're also talking about the school to prison to deportation pipeline, how the pipeline is longer for our Southeast Asian communities, how to support the folks on the inside and in the detention centers. And then as we move through the system is declining. And that is evident, especially when we're applying a lot of pressure. In Parasol, we are supporting folks, Tian Ho, who's inside the detention center, fighting for her freedom. We travel internationally so that we can connect our struggles, not just here, but to China, to Hong Kong, understanding the conversations from the factory workers to the local struggles here. I think what's important about, we also supported Nikita Oliver when she was running for mayor in 2017 and currently now running for city council, is that a lot of these conversations around the youth jail and the police precinct was able to elevate to the forefront of a political campaign. And I think what was important about this campaign currently and before was really taking back the political system and engaging community in a conversation of what do we want our elected officials, how do we want to hold them accountable? How do we run a campaign collectively? And so now we're moving more towards mutual aid. Parasol helped co-started COVID-19 mutual aid and also been active in POP Massage Parlor Outreach Project. We'll talk more during the Q&A about those work, but that's what we've been up to. And so running through these really quick because we can dive more in the Q&A, but here's how to stay in touch with us.
Thanks so much, Marlon and Yin, for that wonderful presentation. So now I'm going to invite Pati Rodriguez to also talk with us a little bit about her work.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to the Chinatown Art Brigade for inviting us. We're longtime friends already, have been organizing together for a while, so I'm really happy to be here to speak on behalf of Mi Casa Resiste. Just to begin, my name is Pati. I actually grew up in Bushwick. In my whole life, I was in Brooklyn, New York, child of immigrants from South America, of indigenous descent, Runa Quichua, and but I grew up here in Brooklyn, in Bushwick, and this is why I do the work. So I want to go forward with trying to share this. So give me 1 second. Okay, let me know if I'm doing it correctly. Can folks see that? Hold on.
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I lost my thing. Okay. Well, hopefully you're going to be able to hear it because I don't know what I did. I'm going to stop it again just because I didn't do the first thing real quick. Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm going to share it again. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. I think now it's correct. All right. So, Mi Casa Resiste. Just a few pictures as an intro of who we are. We've done a lot of work. We've existed since 2015, basically, winter of 2015. Let me see if I can get this working. Okay. So, Mi Casa Resiste, our mission statement is we're a Bushwick anti-capitalist collective using art and direct action to fight the displacement and criminalization of local low-income Black and Brown families in Brooklyn, and specifically in Bushwick. As we know, history of Bushwick displacement here from Lenape lands to Dutch invaders, to German and Italian immigrants, to mass white flight, while poorer Black and Latinx Afro-Indigenous stayed and continued to fight for their homes. We have been here and we continue to be here trying to fight for these homes. We do recognize that this Bushwick is indigenous land, stolen indigenous land from the Canarsie tribes. And we always have that in when we're organizing. We try to always organize from that perspective, and that we understand that gentrification is only the latest tool being used to displace Black and brown bodies from the land. And we've always understood this, and we've always wanted to bring out political education to the community to make those connections. So from the very beginning, we started with Mi Casa Resiste. I'm going to go to the next slide. So since the very beginning of Mi Casa Resiste, we've, when we were founded in Bushwick, Brooklyn by, other Brooklyn natives of Afro-Indigenous descent, who have been basically very impacted by gentrification and displacement ourselves. So, so we started at a local justice hub here in Mayday Space, the Mayday Space here in Bushwick, when it just opened, and we were able to access a space and a camaraderie to create empowering community-centered programming, and met many other Black and brown organizers who grew up in Bushwick, at least I did, through the Mayday Space. And I met many organizers and artists from Brooklyn there working on the intersections of the movement. So a few of us at the Mayday Space who were from either from Bushwick or from somewhere in Brooklyn, all, like I said, Black, brown, Latinx, kids who grew up here. Basically, we formed Mi Casa Resiste in 2015, having proposed an idea to create a community workshop to create anti-gentrification signs to put up in the winter of 2015 when Christmas lights were going up. So Mi Casa was born after that project, basically. After the idea was to take back art, because art at that point had been weaponized to gentrify the area, especially in Bushwick, as y'all know. So when that happened, it raised the rent and it displaced a lot of folks. A lot of my childhood friends and family were displaced from Bushwick. This was why we were doing it, right? And we were using the medium of art, and public art specifically, to be used as direct action, as protest from the home. And so we would take back art to for New York City, and all of us who were tired of being pushed out of our homes. Basically, this is why we were doing it, and we were giving access to these light signs to our local neighbors too, who were also obviously very tired of having to fight for their homes and having to fight to stay here. And as a group, we decided collectively that Mi Casa would always be led by those most impacted and marginalized by gentrification and displacement in the community. Always Black and brown led, and white allyship if they're ready to work. So this is how Mi Casa starts. So since then, so this is the specifics to what our work, basically, because we do a lot of propaganda, right? Basically, most than anything.
Sorry, Pati, can I just jump in? I think that your slides aren't advancing, and I don't want to miss any of your beautiful visuals here.
I don't know why they're not. I'm sorry. Okay. Let me get out of here real quick. Give me 1 second. I'm sorry. Okay. Do you guys see the anti-displacement movement is born in Bushwick?
Yeah, that looks great.
Okay. I'm sorry. So did you guys see this and this and this? Okay. All right. So yeah, this is just what I was saying before. An anti-displacement movement is born in Bushwick. We formed Mi Casa No Es Tu Casa in the fall of 2015. Mi Casa was founded by the Bushwick Brooklyn natives, as I said before, of Afro-Indigenous descent. So yeah, going back to just propaganda for revolutionary thought, Mi Casa has always used visual arts and community engagement to create community power. So we use visual arts and accessible language on different public platforms, including the streets, on homes, at public events, on social media, to build humane political consciousness of the causes and effects of displacement and gentrification. We then invite community to engage in community art builds and actions in order to build that community power. So if you can see down, and then at the bottom, you can see my daughter's drawing there, her little poster. So taking back art for working class people of color in Brooklyn. The following year, after we did, the first year we did an action was in Bushwick. We had light signs go up in the different homes along Bushwick. Around like 25 light signs went up in that winter. And the following winter, because it was such a success, we decided to make light signs that would go out to all over New York City. So light signs went to, you know, South Bronx, to Queens, to Chinatown, to different areas that were being heavily gentrified at the moment and that are continuing to be gentrified right now. And we were able to link up with more housing organizers from these communities, especially the grassroots housing organizers like ourselves in these communities. And we were able to link up with them and have a community art build with them in order for that. And then folks came and took their, once they were finished with their light signs, they took them back to their neighborhoods and put them up in public, visible, highly trafficked areas, which is what we like to do usually, right? So there's a bit of the light signs for y'all to see. They want art, not the people. Mikasa versus art washing. So Mikasa crashed the Bushwick Collective Block Party that was sponsored by Nooklyn in June 2019. Now, the Bushwick Collective Block, the Bushwick Collective is an art collective that was actually founded by one, he's a Bushwick native, this Italian Bushwick born person who created this, or who started bringing in all these artists from all around the world internationally to start putting up basically art, street art on these streets. Barely a few years after, while this whole time our community has always been artistic, and that's the point of why we wanted to take art back for ourselves, because we know that Bushwick and Brooklyn and New York City in general has had artists. A lot of the artists have always been Black and brown, and we've always used the walls as our canvases, right? But it wasn't criminalized until more white people, more social, more wealthy white people started coming in and making the murals. So a lot, which is why I was saying that art was weaponized against us in order to raise the rent at that point, and it was this collective that really basically helped gentrification to come about a lot faster. So we crashed their party. They have the yearly annual party that is the Bushwick Collective Block Party. And so we crashed it, and we did we put down giant banners right behind their festival where they had their stage with two large banners that said they want the art, not the people. And we did this along with the Decolonize This Place, who lent us their giant banner. So we often do a lot of collaboration with other artists around New York City to support our work, depending on the propaganda that we're trying to put out, depending on, yeah. So we'll have memes done by other artists, or we'll have banners done by other artists, or we'll have prints done by other artists, just all types of things. We like to collaborate a lot, especially with artists who are more local. So yeah, because art that is complicit with real estate and developers' interests shall no longer be tolerated in our hood. So this was our first block party crashing. And yeah, Bushwick Collective, Nooklyn, and Rick Ross were shook. So you can see the banners in the back behind when we did that action. While Rick Ross was on stage, we unrolled those banners and dropped them, and it was really dope. So that was that. Now, in 2018, Mikasa enters the fight against the Bushwick rezoning. We started attending Brooklyn Community Board 4 meetings, which is our local community board, at the request of concerned residents on the inside to interrupt the rezoning process, because they were telling us, look, this is going down and we don't know how to stop it. And so we got involved and to make noise and try to, and to also bring political education to the community about what was going on in our neighborhoods, because oftentimes, electeds and the city tend to, want these kinds of rezonings to go under the radar so that people don't fight back. So we entered and we started making posters and started posting them up all over the neighborhood. We started doing canvassing along the neighborhood and started, meeting the small businesses in our neighborhood that were going to be directly affected by this proposed community plan, or the Bushwick community plan and the rezoning plan that was from the Department of City Planning. So we had to try to fight both before it was too late, because they were about to, they wanted to rezone 300 blocks. It would have been one of the biggest rezonings in New York City. So the battle for Bushwick begins. Me got enters the fight. At the CB4 meeting, one of our first actions was in June 2018 against them, when DCP tried to present their plan, and we shut down the meeting with testimony and mic checks. This effectively delayed the CB4's, the community board's process at the time, which gave us time that summer to do 2 town halls before the community board went back into session in September. The Department of City Planning scoping hearing disruption. We also had a disruption in 2019. Later after that, in July 2019, we invited new members of Casa to a community art build, and we created banners to be used at the Department of City Planning scoping hearing action the next week. And we also interrupted that. So it was really great. And, I think we changed a lot of opinions of the community board itself of Bushwick at that meeting when we confronted the Department of City Planning themselves. That was right before pandemic. Right before the pandemic, we actually teamed up with a lot of organizations from around the city, citywide organizations that were fighting the rezonings in their areas. And we united as a coalition to fight the Department of City Planning that was doing this to us, obviously under de Blasio's plans, right? Basically because de Blasio actually initialized a lot of these rezonings when he came in with his progressive agenda. So we got together with the organizations like from all over New York City, basically from Equality for Flatbush to, I think, Chinatown Art Brigade joined us. Also Take Back the Bronx, Queens Neighborhoods United, a lot of organizations, grassroots organizations, we all teamed up together to basically do an action where we took over, where we actually went into the building lobby of the Department of City Planning, and we had a big rally right inside the building, and it was really great. And it culminated in the winter of 2019. So it was right before pandemic was hitting. And the DCP ran away. DCP said they didn't want to rezone Bushwick. So we were successful, at least for now. They have not rezoned Bushwick. They did not want to go forward with that. So now what is Casa doing now? So since pandemic, we saw the necessity to take on more, obviously, direct work for the community, especially because of the pandemic was just showing all the inequality and inefficiency that the city has always been showing in our communities and in our neighborhoods and towards Black and Brown people and Latinx and immigrant people, so and Indigenous people. So I want to just come in with this, what is mutual aid, right? Or because we were thinking about this because everyone was talking about mutual aid in the beginning of the pandemic, because everyone needed support. The government was, we were seeing that the government was very inefficient in responding to anything. They're just complete disregard for communities, especially the communities that have always been disregarded, basically. So all these Black and brown communities were suffering, and they were also having the highest death tolls in the United States. Well, at that point in the United States, but also in New York City. So we decided that we needed to really act. And so I just wanted to go into the mutual aid so folks know what mutual aid actually means. Mutual aid is systems of mutual aid communities take on the responsibility for caring for one another rather than forcing individuals to fend for themselves. Mutual aid is not charity. It creates a symbiotic relationship where all people in a community offer material goods or assistance to one another. Mutual aid organizing is volunteer run, transparent, and driven by needs articulated by the community members themselves. We now follow in the practice and legacy of the Black Panthers and the Young Lords by providing a community survival program for our community here in North Brooklyn. So Comida para el Pueblo is born. So Comida para el Pueblo is an initiative collectively led by 3 Bushwick-based grassroots organizations, including North Political Resistance, G Rebels, and Mi Casa Resiste. Together, we work to distribute free, fresh produce, non-perishables, and prepared meals, PPE, toiletries, and other essential items based on community needs on a bi-weekly basis at Humboldt Street in between Moore and Barrett in front of La Marqueta, the famous Marqueta, which is in a very predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood and historically Puerto Rican neighborhood in which is basically located at the corners of that encompass Bushwick, South Williamsburg or East Williamsburg, and Bed-Stuy. So we work to obtain items by donation or by raising funds to buy from local businesses, restaurants, and Black and Brown owned farms. So Comida para el Pueblo. And so through these biweekly distributions, the biweekly distributions gives us an opportunity to show our community that we don't have to rely on the government to begin the work of creating a safer, more sustainable community. Our goal is to provide ongoing support as we assess needs and systemize sustainable ways of redistribution. Some of the ways that we've done that, obviously, like in the summer, we started in the last summer, around July of 2020. We started doing these, the Comida para el Pueblo food distribution. And, you know, gradually we just went adjusting depending on the community needs. And, you know, throughout the winter, we also started doing deliveries, because a lot of the people who we were, we serve about 180 something now families in the community of North Brooklyn. And a lot of these families tend to, or the people who come to pick up food or who we delivered to were elders. And so we needed to switch to delivery in the wintertime just because we didn't want to have the elders, you know, standing in the cold, especially during a pandemic. So we had to switch gears then. So we're always like adjusting and everything. I wanted to show this video real quickly. So if folks want to just check out a little bit of like what we do at Comida para el Pueblo. This is from the beginning when we did this, when we first started in July of 2020. And obviously since then, things have gotten even bigger, and this Comida para el Pueblo has only grown, and, you know, and the necessity has grown too, you know, unfortunately. So we're always needing more and more donations, and we get those donations usually. We have 2 different places where we are able to take on donations, which is the Media Space and this other La Canteen, which is a small business in the area. And we're always looking for more support from different local businesses to try to just donate food for the community. So I'm going to play this video. Hopefully it'll play. We use this to put this out in social media because we continue to gain more volunteers.
Hi, I'm Bianca.
I'm Pedro.
We're with New York Boricua Resistance, Mi Casa Resiste, and G Rebels. We're 3 Bushwick organizations looking to sustain a bi-weekly food distribution here on Humboldt between Moore Street and Barrett. And so in order to do that, we need
Hey, Pati, I think we're frozen on our end. I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Okay, so it looks like we lost Pati there, unfortunately. But I'm sure she will rejoin us soon so we can continue hearing more about her amazing work. But maybe for the moment, we can start by asking a couple of questions to, or Pati has rejoined us. Sorry, Pati, I think you froze there for a little bit.
I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah. Should I share this again?
Yeah, I think that maybe the video is like, was making it.
Yeah, I think so.
More, yeah, but it looks amazing.
No worries. Let me share this again then.
Wonderful. Sounds great.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Sorry, my internet is garbage here. Here we go. Okay. Great. So, yeah, so that was Comida para el Pueblo. And obviously we do a lot of promotion through online. You can always find us at Comida para el Pueblo if folks want to volunteer. We are always trying it through social media and on the street. We've been also posting posters for Comida para el Pueblo to get in order for us to get the non-perishables and other donations that we need for the biweekly distributions. And we have also gained more and more volunteers through all these postings online and in the street. So it's been great. It's been organically growing, you know, for lack of a better term. So another project that we're currently working with as Mi Casa Resiste is the Frack Out of Brooklyn Coalition. So Mi Casa Resiste was a founder of this coalition along with Indigenous Kinship Collective, New York Boricua Resistance, Earth Strike, University, CN Brooklyn, among other people. And we've also collaborated on actions since then with the No North Brooklyn Pipeline Coalition, which is a larger, more nonprofit-y coalition that's been also fighting this pipeline and or doing the campaign to fight the pipeline. And we've also been working a lot with the Brownsville community through the Brownsville Green Committee. So Frack Out of BK, though, the Frack Out of Brooklyn Coalition is a Black, Brown, and Indigenous-led effort to stop National Grid from charging us to build a toxic pipeline through our neighborhoods. Also to just stop the flow of this toxic gas, this fracking gas that is going through our neighborhoods, underneath our homes, underneath schools, underneath public schools, daycares, putting us all at risk. So some of our demands are no rate hikes, don't charge New York City for National Grid's profits, because at the end of the day, what they're using this gas line for is it's so that it could go to a refinery up in Greenpoint. It's going, this pipeline specifically is going through Brownsville. It's going through Bushwick, Brownsville, East New York, Bed-Stuy, Williamsburg, and it's supposed to end at Greenpoint so that they can refine it and most likely to use it for exportation. This gas is not for us. It's not meant to be for us. It's just supposed to transfer through our neighborhood. But in that transference, it puts us all at risk of serious health risks and of explosions. So some of the demands that we have are no rate hikes, don't charge New York City for National Grid's profits, no shutoffs, cutting our gas and gentrification, no fossil funding. You know, people, bank, and New York State should divest from climate destruction and environmental racism, and no pipelines on stolen land. We must have climate self-determination for BIPOC, poor, and working class communities. So we started, okay, so I want to just give a little bit of background on it. So the Brooklyn Pipeline fight environmental racism in our backyards. The pipeline is carrying frack gas through Brownsville, Bedford, Stuyvesant, as I said, Bushwick, Williamsburg, Greenpoint, to the National Grid Depot in Newtown Creek in Greenpoint. This pipeline is currently active right now, putting our neighborhood's health at risk. Brooklyn residents never consented to this, obviously, as they never consent for any of these kinds of toxic projects to happen here. And environmental racism is just something that it always happens, passes through by these, National Grid is not even like the government, right? The National Grid is a for-profit from Great Britain colonizer like company monopoly, because it holds a monopoly on energy in New York City. So this is a giant monster that we're fighting right now, and that is continuing to just build these infrastructure for frack gas, and when they should be building infrastructure for renewable energy already. We need to move away from that. But and that's our whole fight. Why we're, because we want self-determination, we want autonomy and community control in order for us to determine what kind of energy we should have in our communities, that we want healthy communities, because we all deserve to live in a healthy environment where we can actually survive and thrive, no matter our income bracket or the color of our skin. So the pipeline is currently active. National Grid has yet to receive approval, though, for one of the parts of the fifth phase, which is asking for additional 185 million in taxpayer funds to complete all phases of the project. They currently actually just put out this proposal that is going to be, I think, still voted on to see if they can finalize this and have us, the people in Brooklyn and New York City, pay for this pipeline for the construction that they've been doing since 2017, very quietly, because they haven't informed anyone in these neighborhoods where the pipeline is going through. Estimates show that approximately 153,000 New Yorkers reside within the evacuation zone, aka the sacrifice zone of the pipeline, alongside 60 schools and 80 daycare centers. Were it to leak or explode, it would be just devastating. We must stop National Grid now. So if folks are interested in that, you could always hit us up for more information and for ways to plug in at Frack Out of BK. We've since October, we've actually we took action against this pipeline, and I was one of the first people to go and chain myself to the pipeline itself in Bushwick. While it was still being constructed, and we were able to, and we did this, it wasn't just me, it was like 12 different people along different days that we were able to just, break into the pipeline construction sites and chain ourselves to the parts of the pipeline in order to delay the construction of these pipelines. So, which successfully delayed them, which was great, so we were able to delay a lot of it, and but and we cost them money, which is what we wanted, right? Cost National Grid more money. So, but obviously National Grid is going to try to take that out of our pockets, though, as taxpayers. So we're still fighting them for that reason. And we've been doing political education, teach-ins, town halls, community art builds, in local, during the summertime, we did community art builds in the local different community gardens around Bushwick, so that we could meet our neighbors, build community with them, and also just do this political education and informing them as to what's going on in the neighborhood, so that they can get, rowdy and join us in this fight. So, so since basically January 2020, we've been doing all these kinds of things, teach-ins, town halls. We've been creating all types of presentations like this one today, community art builds, weed pasting and flyering in the community. We've been doing a lot of flyering. We try to do flyering hopefully every weekly. But obviously with capacity, we're always needing more and more volunteers to do more of that work. But we've been doing this kind of political education in the community since January of 2020 to get the word out to the public. And now we are trying to educate our children, actually. So since then, we're now currently in touch with different schools along the pipeline route in Brooklyn. And specifically, we're in touch with some schools in the area in Bushwick, in Greenpoint, in and in parts and Williamsburg. And we've been in touch with a few different like PTAs, parent teacher like organizations from these different public schools that are along this pipeline. And we are giving presentations to like parents basically to let them know what's going on and let these pipelines are really close to the schools, you know? So, and we were able to actually be in touch with, because we wanted to do a video, which I'm going to show you guys right now. Maybe hopefully it can play if it's a problem, or maybe I won't play because I don't know. But we created a video here, which is called Water Protectors and Land Protectors. And it's basically like a Reading Rainbow video, and it's for children. And it explains what the pipeline is, how what the harms are. And it does a comparison between the land protectors here in Brooklyn and the water protectors from Standing Rock, to make a comparison between those fights and you know, the fossil fuel industry basically, and so that the children, who are the ones who are going to be most impacted obviously by all this, should know. So we're informing now the kids, and we're trying to, and we're creating, we co-created curriculums that are going to go to the different schools that we're in touch with, and that will go with a book, which is the Book of the Water Protectors of Standing Rock, which is a children's book that I read in this video actually, where we do the comparison and everything. So it's really cute. If you guys haven't seen it, I don't know if I want to try to even put this, because I'm afraid I'm gonna lose the connection again. So, but if you guys can, you can always look up any of our work of Frac at a BK. It's at Frac at a BK, and Mi Casa is definitely leading a lot of this work in this efforts.
Brooklyn activists are fighting the North Brooklyn pipeline. This pipeline is carrying fat gas underground all the way from Pennsylvania to Brooklyn in New York City.
Can people see that, or was that? Where am I gone again?
Yeah, no, we saw it. I think it was a little bit quiet, but we did get to see a little clip of it. It looks really great.
Cute. Should I play it or no? I think it's too long though. It's anyway, I read a book in this thing. It's very cute. It's for kids. It's directed for kids. But if you watch it, you're going to learn from it too, if you don't know anything about this pipeline. So it's really awesome. If you want to look at it, you can go to at Frac at a BK. We have it there. We also have it at Mi Casa Resiste if you want to go to our own IG page too, or Facebook. We have it all over the place, and we want to make it viral. So if you guys have kids at home, or you know of kids around you, you'll send that out, you know, because it's really great. It's a really great video that we did in collaboration with North Brooklyn Pipeline folks, with Frac at a BK folks, and with the Brownsville Green Committee folks. So it was really beautifully done, and it was filmed in Brownsville. So now, in continuation, the next project that we're working on currently is the Bushwick eviction resistance. Now we know that since the pandemic hit, a lot of folks aren't able to pay their bills because people weren't able to work a lot of times. And, you know, so there's like months that people haven't been paying bills. A lot of people are still on strike, on rent strike in different places. Some people have even been evicted, but, you know, have been evicted or illegally evicted from their homes. So we at Mi Casa Resiste are teaming up with Mayday Space and a couple of other local organizations in Bushwick to expand a network that would support an eviction defense, basically, so that we could do more of basically blocking of any evictions on, you know, and doing stoop watches, things like that. So we're still in the development of this network here in Bushwick. It would be an extension to the, I don't know if folks know of the Brooklyn Eviction Defense Network that started also close to the, started around the summer of 2020 also, or they started forming up at least. And now they're mostly located in central Brooklyn. So we're looking to extend, like using their model, we want to extend it to Bushwick so that we can have basically a rapid response to evictions when they start happening in the neighborhood. So we're teaming up with hopefully local organizations in the neighborhood like Bridges Tennis Union and other organizations that so that we could all get together and basically try to stop these evictions once they start. because it's going to be a lot and we really need to fight for our neighbors. So one of the projects that we've been working on within this work is we've been helping the victims of fires who are, these tenants are tenants of this basically infamous slumlord in Bushwick, Lowton, and they basically, these people, they were displaced by fires. There were 2 fires, suspicious fires in 2 different buildings that are owned by the same, slumlord that never does repairs, and he's already known for this kind of thing. And these are families that have been in the community for more than 20, 30 years, and they're being evicted, right? Or well, they were displaced. They are still waiting for the repairs, and he hasn't done any repairs because obviously this is another attempt to just try to take them out of their home so that they can go away, and then he could up the rent. So so we've been doing rallies for these families, these 2 families in particular that we've been working with for this campaign, and we have found one of our old enemies actually helping here, which is Nooklin. So we did an action against Nooklin too, just to, because Nooklin has been basically used as the intermediary for this slumlord in order to get wealthier white tenants to replace his Black and brown working class tenants. And that's happened many times. And Nooklin still has a lot of Lowton's listings up. And they have apartments up while this slumlord is not allowing for these families that were displaced because of the fires that are waiting right now for the repairs. He's not giving them like those spaces that he's putting up in the Nooklin sites. So we are demanding that Nooklin, bring down all the listings, the apartment listings for this slumlord to bring them down, because it's just causing more displacement. And Nooklin is definitely complicit and has been complicit for long, and we know this. So we're going to continue our campaign against this particular slumlord, Lowton and Nooklin. So this is one of the things that's been one of our latest actions and rallies that we're doing, and we're doing them every 2 weeks or so now. And our last project that we're working on at the moment is saving the secret garden. Now, I don't know if folks know about this garden, but it is a secret. The secret garden actually was a very big garden. It was active. It's huge, if you can see there in the photo there. And it was a beautiful garden that was a community garden. The community held it up, and it made it grow, and it was one of the biggest community gardens that it was even in the New York Times, like in the 80s or 90s, right? Showing one of the biggest community gardens like in the area of Brooklyn. And now, after this, the city sold it off to a developer, and then that developer sold it off to another developer. They're planning to build a 20-story development atop this giant, beautiful green space. And we don't have a lot of green spaces in Brooklyn. We already know that. Nor in Bushwick, there isn't too many, so we always need more, because our neighbors used to be food deserts, and the food that we do have around the area used to be just like junk food and stuff. So these community gardens were always very important to our communities too, so that we could feed our communities with like good vegetables, good food, things that will actually help us, and that won't kill us, like the local, and chips and stuff, So we need, so we're now starting to build a campaign around this, because they're about to start building, but you can still see the green is there, but there's also like all the different the beams and stuff that they want to start building already on top of this garden. So we had an event last week where we put a prompt, and of like, what do you want to see grow in Brooklyn, and we had, and we were right in front of the community garden, which is gated right now. As you see, it's surrounded by like all this like scaffold stuff, the wall, and so we basically set up in front of there, and we had prompts like that so people could come and write down their thoughts. I was like, would they want to see built here? What do they want to see growing here? And, you know, obviously it's about the garden, and it was great. It was so successful that like the original caretakers of this garden, you know, which a lot of them are Black folk from the community in Bushwick, they saw us there, and they started telling us their stories of like what they went through when they were trying to fight for this garden and everything. So we're now, you know, trying to work with these OGs, you know, to basically see if we can shame the city and these builders into stopping before they start building this giant, you know, monstrosity of a luxury building that's probably not going to go for anyone in this community, because we're, you know, even if they even agree to saying that they're going to do some affordable housing, it's never affordable to us, as we know, since they use medians from like upstate New York and stuff. Anyway, that's the last project that we have thus far. And that is it for my presentation. And I'm sorry if I went too long, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Pati, Yin, and Marlon. I'm just in awe. I mean, I've always been a fan of the work that Cit Coalition and Casa does, but just hearing everything in the span of 30 minutes, my mind is blown, and I'm just so appreciative of all the work, vision, grit that all of you have shared with us. And I have so many questions. So I know that we only have until 7:30, which is 15 minutes from now. I'm just going to go ahead and ask the first question that I've been thinking about, and I think the rest of CAB has been thinking about as a collective. And it has to do with the preservation of this work. And I guess part of sustainability involves being able to document ongoing work, right? And, you know, we've been talking about this a lot as a collective. What does it mean for us to archive our ongoing work and to record and to document work that continues to unfold? And so I just wanted to ask a little bit about whether or not you've been thinking about whether or not your collectives have been recording your ongoing struggles, right? And this place-based work and what that might look like. So this is for both groups.
Well, I can answer for, I guess. Yes. So documenting has always been a big part of Mi Casa, because we already know that, you know, we can't let others tell our own stories, right? Because they'll whitewash them, they'll make it, you know, yeah, more reformist or whatever, right? So we needed to really document the militant actions that we are doing, like the real like revolutionary acts that we're trying to do, because we think it's important that marginalized communities document their own and tell their own stories and to tell their own histories, right? To document their own histories as they from their own perspective. So it has always been important to me, Casa Resiste, to document our work, which is why we have so much photos and stuff. We started with social media because we were just like, this is the only way we're going to be able to like really figure out what happened from this date to this date, because we do a lot. So you know, so it's always been important for us to have somebody doing social media or somebody doing photography or somebody doing, especially at actions and things like that, you know, because those are the things that obviously, you know, it's not going to be on the news in the, you know, main New York Times or anything all the time. So, or, you know, sometimes you get lucky, like we actually got into the, and all of that, like whatever little media coverage we get or big media coverage we get, it's been a result from our own documentation, right? Because we've been putting it out to the community through social media and through posters and things like that, then the press comes to us, and because we're already telling them our story. Like we're like, okay, this is it, right? And I think it's always been that way. Like we are very much like we definitely think it's extremely important for the communities to be able to tell their own stories always, because yeah, you don't want anyone changing history for you. You know, the oppressors always do that, right? So
yeah,
I agree with everything Patty said. Really, telling your own story is super important. And not just that, in the beginning, when we were still getting started as a collective, we'd meet with the developer because they, wanted to meet with us and just hear, tell us what they're doing and wanted to hear what we think. And then all of a sudden they'd turn around and say that we're 100% in support of their project. So stuff like that can't happen. And we need to have all the receipts written down, especially when we're working with our straight up. But in terms of the regular work we do, I mean, obviously we have weekly meetings and we have an unwieldy Google Doc with everything we talk about. But more important is what we share on social media. I mean, I think just going back to the uprisings and seeing what the power of individuals and their social accounts can do, I think that's a place where we really amplify our history that we're making in the present. And in addition, as a little side project, is that a lot of work?
What is the side project? You broke up a little bit, but it sounds exciting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've just been working on trying to write our narrative down in a single document. Because, for future generations of organizers, everything we talk about in the past is mostly passed down to oral history. And to have it on a piece of paper would just be so dope, but it's so much work.
I'll just add real quick that I feel like documentation is, I feel like nonprofits do a better job of doing documentation. Yeah. And as grassroots, that's always the goal, but it tends to not happen. I feel like especially through oral, we're able to share a lot of the stories of how nonprofits were formed at Busch Garden during the 60s to 70s as communities were coming together to create what, the CID needed. And so I don't know that we document as much as we really should, but yes, we do when it's our own media.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just also add that Cav is actually working on a zine right now about our own work, which as we go through it, we realize is very much kind of linked to the work of a lot of groups that came before us, but also linked with groups like your guys's that, our struggles have linked up, and, it's really exciting to be going through that history. And it's in something that I think has really sustained us during the pandemic to be looking at that from this perspective. But yeah, I was really curious about how you all see the relationship between the mutual aid work that you've been doing, which has been really inspiring during the pandemic, and kind of your more let's say campaign oriented organizing work. Do you see that one kind of feeds into the base building more, but also how do you see that moving forward in the work that both your groups do?
I guess I'll go first. Mutual aid. Okay, after pandemic, yes. So the mutual aid work that we do through Comida para el Pueblo is something that we're gonna be doing ongoing. At the beginning, we were like, okay, right now that people need it, we're thinking just because the capacity wasn't super new for us, right, to do. Because we were first approached by New York Political Resistance actually to support them with trying to do this. And we were like, sure. I mean, it's for the community, and we definitely need to do this. It's it's a pandemic. So we definitely just said, hell yeah, let's do it. But we were very new to all this kind of work. But so in the beginning, we thought it was going to be I guess for a period or whatever we thought. But obviously seeing the necessity, there's real necessity right now. And with the communities, and especially the communities that we service are a lot of houseless folks, a lot of folks who a lot of Black, brown, indigenous immigrant families, Arabic families too, Asian families. It's just it's a big mix and we understand and we come from families like this. We ourselves as volunteers, when there's enough food, we also take to our own homes afterwards, because that's the mutual aid part, right? So you know, like, and I'm able to give groceries to my mom, you know, that kind of thing, you know, here in the neighborhood. So seeing that and personalizing that and like really bringing ourselves into this work, like, you know, we came to the conclusion and decision that we were like, yeah, we're going to do this forever. Then I think we're going to have to continue this, and we need to, and this is the way to really like build autonomy from these like racist police state, right? So so I think like, yeah, we thought that it was very necessary to continue this kind of work, and obviously build more capacity to sustain it and continue to do it, you know, until, you know, it's no longer needed, I guess, you know, I don't know. But like right now, we're trying to continue to do this. At least the Comida para Pueblo is supposed to be something that's ongoing. Frac at a BK, you know, we started fighting in the middle of the pandemic, like right before the pandemic, mejor dicho, hit. It was like in January of 2020. So obviously we don't want to fight this forever, right? We want to stop this pipeline right now, right? We want to stop the gas from flowing and everything. So, you know, I'm hoping it's not an ongoing thing but one thing that will be ongoing for Frac BK that we're already we're working on, and we're talking with other organizations to partner up to do this kind of work, is that the next step is going to be to actually build a campaign of empowerment for the community so that we can start building infrastructure needed to move away from fossil fuels. So that's basically what's coming up for Frac BK, and that's going to be an ongoing project, definitely, until we're able to get everything that we want, like the gardens, the solar panels, whatever, you know, we need. So so we're already in touch with different organizations that have access to the engineers and to the technology and to the different things that would be needed, and the programs that residents would need to access in order to get this kind of thing at an affordable rate and stuff. So yeah, so that's in the works, and that's something that's going to continue from here. Obviously the Bushwick eviction stuff, the resistance, that's ongoing. I mean, that's what we started with, and that's what we're continuing to do. Obviously now it's a little bit more direct actively, because before it was more of a propaganda campaign for you know, in the beginning it was supposed to be more of it was politicization, right? It was building consciousness about it, because that's how you start. You can't just start with actions, right? And same thing with the Frac BK campaign. Like when we first started, people were like, oh, let's have an action. Like it was like, so some white organizers called me to a meeting and they're like, oh, we're gonna have action tomorrow. I'm like, does it mean know that there's even a pipeline coming through? Like, what are you doing? Why? They're not gonna know. They're just to see white bodies there doing something, and no one's gonna even care, right? So it's like, and that's what happened. They had like some action, nobody cared, and they were like, okay, whatever these white gentrifiers are doing, I don't know, right? It's like, that's what the community sees, right? You need to have political education first. You need to have talk to the community first about what's going on, and then have actions, and then invite the community to the actions. So it's like, so yeah, so with that being said, we're going to continue to do that kind of programming. We're going to continue to have and with the Bushwick eviction resistance specifically, yes, we're now starting with again, the outreach is one of the first things we start doing, and we're doing tabling more at in the parks and things like that, in order to get the word out to the community that we want to do this, and maybe they want to plug into the network of defense work. So so that's going to be definitely ongoing, and which sucks, because I wish they could just cancel rent and then it wouldn't have to happen, right? But that's it.
Yeah, that's awesome, Patty. Over here in Seattle, when it comes to mutual aid, can y'all hear me okay? Okay, good. Yeah, when it comes to mutual aid, I mean, Yin, starting at the beginning of the pandemic, was a rock star with her and connecting us with other orgs to really help out with COVID-19 Mutual Aid Solidarity Network. And then right when that happened, we were focusing on folks not reached by government aid and city programs, undocumented folks, houseless folks, also just folks who were just recently unemployed and couldn't really navigate the unemployment system in the beginning. And some people just really needed just the necessities, food, shelter. We also worked as individuals, not as a collective, with our nonprofit industrial complex here to provide support with food deliveries, et cetera, et cetera. And then, holy crap, when the uprisings happened, the world turned upside down, and it really doubled down our need for mutual aid. And mutual aid is just inherently radical. And practicing that, I believe, is just a part of our campaign, part of our strategy and our principles. Fast forward to today, We did like a little Instagram fundraiser and raised a couple $1,000s for mutual aid for a bunch of local groups here in Seattle doing some dope stuff. We're also working with some organizers who have been doing mutual aid and have built like a really strong relationship with some of the 200 to 300 houseless folks in our neighborhood today. And in America's fastest growing city and one of the wealthiest ones, we have like the third worst housing crisis. And being out there on the streets and Memorial Day for the Saturday before it for the Coast to Coast Week of Action, we're planning a big mutual aid event, and we're gonna be hosting Community Clean and a little bit of political education too. And I personally just don't see a line between our campaign work and our mutual aid work. It's one and the same. Yin, do you have anything to add?
Thank you, Marlon. I just want to add that I think mutual aid is just a continued practice of what our community has been doing, showing up for each other, providing food, providing daycare for each other, just support. And so this is just a new term or more local term that our families have been doing. And so, yes, I definitely see this continuously going. And I think that's definitely an outcome, at least in Seattle, for the COVID-19 mutual aid, that there is a more practice of giving and redistribution of wealth. And I think that's becoming a more sustaining practice, that people are allocating part of their income, resources, a lot of ask of like stimulus checks to be reallocated to folks inside, to undocumented folks, and a lot of call to action that often are met within 24 hours. So there is this feeling of abundance of resource and practice of giving. And I think that's a very important cultural shift since last year. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, so it seems as though we are at time, but this has just been such a wonderful conversation, and I'm just inspired by so much of what you shared. For folks wanting to get involved, right, and get plugged into this work, follow the links that were shared in the chat, all of the Twitter handles, the links to the campaigns, etc. There are so many ways to get involved in this work, right? And it's never too late. So find ways to get involved if you can, wherever you're based, right? There's so much place-based work and mutual aid work going on. Big thanks to Emily, to Nadia at the Bard Graduate Center for bringing us together, and to Pati at Casa, Resiste, Marlon, Yin, Sid Coalition. I know that we'll be continuing to work together in the future, so excited to see where this work takes us. And follow up for recording as well as for the second session, which will be in June, sorry, not July, on cultural work and abolition. And so we'll follow up with the link to that in a bit as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Check out the recording to listen in if you want to again.
Thank you, everyone.